So, Eric, what do you want to get out of your diet?
The first thing that comes to mind when I hear diet is that I really don't like that word.
I don't like the word diet either, because it seems like it's a project of some kind.
Yeah,
Not
and it
a
has the
lifestyle.
word die in it.
Yeah. What word would you prefer?
So what would I like to get out of? I'll just go simple. The food I'm eating, and
Yeah.
for that matter, drinking. What would I like to get out of the food I'm eating? I'd like to get energy, focus, a long life, health, whatever health means. And I'd like to look good. I like to look good. Yeah, I think those are kind of 5 main things I'd like to get out of the food I'm eating.
That makes a lot of sense. I'd share those.
Yeah. And we started talking about this, you and I, like probably 3 years ago. And since then, we were in Africa. And I remember you laughed at my breakfast. I was having pancakes. And you're like, Eric, don't eat pancakes for breakfast. I was like, why? And since then, you've given me all of these like tricks to get more energy and be more healthy. And I've basically just done them without really understanding what they are. So I'm excited to do this podcast episode to go over these different life hacks from a food, health, energy perspective that I've been doing for a couple of years and never understanding. So that's what this episode will be about.
That is what this is about. And if you're new here, I'm speaking with Eric Bergman, who is the founder of Great. He is a serial entrepreneur, a good friend of mine. And I think you have the perspective that many entrepreneurs have. I want to get energy and the benefits, but I don't really have all that much time to go into the nitty-gritty details about health. So I will try to make this as simple as I can.
I appreciate that. And I'm here with Emil, who is the first person joining me in Great. My very smart friend, but more than anything today, the biggest health nerd I know. Someone who actually, I don't know how many thousands of hours of reading and YouTube videos he's been watching on this topic. And he tends to come with what I consider to be weird ideas, and then they turn out to be smart and working. So I'm excited to hear more about the background stories of these things today.
You've only tried the things that are working.
Yeah.
And together we are doing the Becoming Great podcast. And the purpose of why we're doing this is to help and give inspiration to entrepreneurs who want to make the world a better place. And in this podcast, we do different kinds of episodes. 4 kinds, actually. One kind is about our organization, Great.com, a company that will give away 100% of its profits to charity. One type of podcasts that we do is about personal development and life hack. And this episode about health definitely falls into the category of life hacks. One type of episode we do is to help entrepreneurs. We talk about business. And the 4th kind are episode that is about Eric Bergman and his journey in business and life and relationships and whatnot. Did I miss something there, Eric?
No, I think you summarized it well. And for some extra context here, we've just been talking to some real podcast professionals, and their feedback to us was, hey guys, you need to be more structured. It needs to be clear what you're talking about. You're talking about so many things at the same time. So from now on, we will be structured.
Like a German train, yeah?
Yeah, so let's jump into this.
Let's do.
Okay, so one of the things you've been talking about over the last couple of years is fasting. And I think that this is crazy. And I know that you haven't eaten for 7 days right now. What's up about? You're in this cabin in the forest. And when you started talking to me before we did this podcast, like, yeah, I haven't eaten for 7 days. I just want to cozy up in the couch, eat some gingerbread and watch some Christmas show. It's like, Why are you putting yourself through this?
Well, the explanation is very simple. I want to live longer than you so I can take over great. And instead of donating the money to charity, I will build a huge golden statue in my own honor.
Ah, I see. And that you will do from fasting.
Yes.
I think you'll need to break it down a little bit more.
Okay. So longevity is definitely my biggest reason for doing this. And when
you say longevity, what do you mean?
I mean living for a long time. And living for a long time, in my head, I get the image laying longer in a hospital bed at the end of my life feeling miserable. But what I mean is that I want to slow down my biological aging, meaning that I want to have an old body later in my life.
Okay, so you want to slow down your aging, basically, meaning that when you're 70, you'll hopefully have the body of a 50-year-old.
Exactly. That's precisely right.
Okay, and how does that add into fasting? What does fasting do with this?
So imagine that your body is a city, and you as a decision maker is the governor of the city. Now, you can choose to do a lot of different things. You can, and if you eat, that is kind of like your city is building new things, building new roads, building new houses, maybe going out in war and conquering another territory. But when you don't eat, your body goes into kind of a maintenance work. You spend your energy on collecting garbage and energy into hospitals. And when we were back in the old days, before civilization, we didn't eat 3 times per day necessarily always. So there was time for the body to get into this maintenance system that has a fancy name that I will not use.
Say the fancy word.
Autophagy, it's called. When the body is cleaning up itself.
Okay, that makes sense. So basically when we put food into our body turn that food into energy or into cells or into things. It works with that food.
Exactly.
And if we don't put it into our food, our body can instead focus on other things.
Yes, so autophagy gets activated gradually and it starts to kick in after about 16 hours without food. And then your body goes into maintenance and it's clearing up cells, it removes garbage, it removes toxins and get that out of your system.
Okay, so you have told me about intermittent fasting, or if that's actually Johanna, my fiance, who started doing that. And that touches on what you said now with 16 hours. So what I'm doing, I've never gone 7 crazy days without food. I'm still gonna call you crazy. You just have to live with that. I'm not convinced enough.
It's not necessary to do that.
No, but
this is my fun little project.
Yes, what I'm doing is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I stop eating at 8 o'clock the day before, and I don't eat until 12 the day after, giving me this gap of 16 hours. And I've heard that if I do this for 3 times a week, that's almost as good as doing it every day. Does this make sense, or is this just something I'm making up for myself?
That makes a lot of sense. And if it's working for you, then that is fantastic, right?
I can't know if it's working until I'm 70 and feeling like 50.
That is true. So how do you feel day to day?
I feel very good, but I have no idea if that's depending on intermittent fasting or something else.
How often are you sick?
Very rarely.
So it's a good sign. Now, so those fasting, my goal with fasting is to do exactly like you do. 3 days per week, I eat 0 calories before lunch. And then my goal is to 2 times per year do a longer fast, somewhere between 3 and this time I'm going for 10 days. That I think I'm going to do maybe once every 50 years or something. And the reason I want to do these fasts that are a little bit longer are 2. First is that autophagy starts to kick in after 16 hours. And then you're breaking the fast when you're just starting to get the most effects out of this maintenance system. So I want to be in that state a little bit longer. And yes, you had a question.
Now I'm thinking, is there like any study saying how much value you get from this? So if you don't fast for if you fast for 10 days, will you get an extra month of healthy life? Or is there like any kind of tests that we done on like rats that they survive this and that much longer if they don't get food?
Yes, we have done tests on all animals on Earth except humans. And basically, if you lower calorie intake, you prolong lifespan. So there's good evidence on that. And aging is a very, very, very complex process. But to oversimplify it a lot, one reason is cumulative damage to your DNA. And there are research coming out that suggests
now you're saying complicated words and you've lost me. Cumulative damage to my DNA. Elaborate.
Okay, so you get damage over time to your DNA, and that is causing aging. And that's
what makes us older.
Yeah, and there are research that suggests that not eating trigger processes that prevents and repair this DNA damage process.
Okay, so could you say that the reason why we're getting older is that we keep copying our DNA? So like the good old days when you were copying a paper in school and you did the same copy over and over and over again, after a while it got less easy to read. Is that what happens when we're aging?
Exactly. That is a beautiful metaphor.
I didn't know that.
And there are research that I've seen by a guy called David Sinclair. He has a TED Talk that suggests that not eating triggers a certain kind of protein that prevents this process.
Okay.
And I've seen research that suggests that fasting prolongs the lives of rats, for example, as well, yes.
Okay.
Another thing that will cause you to die is disease. And disease can have to do with, for example, toxic buildup and things not having the chance to be cleared out of your body. And fasting helps with that too.
Okay, so I feel that I've got a pretty good idea about fasting. And if I'm wrapping it up in a sentence or a few sentences, first feel the need of saying we have definitely not done tests on all animals on the planet.
No, we haven't.
A lot of that. I'd like to see the blue whale test. Blue whale test. But yeah, I just felt the need of saying that. So fasting, the easiest way of doing it, one easy way of doing it would be to do it 16 hours per day for 3 days a week, or maybe just 1 day per week is better than nothing. And then the essential part is to have 0 calories during this time. And that in itself will, among other things, have the health benefits of slowing down aging by slowing down the process of the body copying itself. And the body doesn't have to deal with the food coming in, so instead it can deal with rejuvenating itself and cleaning up and just taking care of itself, because basically no one is knocking on the door and say, deal with this food that's in your stomach, so instead you can focus on another thing.
Exactly. It's kind of like your city is going to war. At that time, we will spend less money on garbage and hospitals. We need to expand and do something.
Okay. Did I miss something on fasting? You want to put a pin in that one and jump onto the next weird thing I'm doing?
I'm happy to move forward. And thank you for clarifying things where I'm using words that are not true. I really want to clarify that I am not a doctor or a researcher. I'm a happy enthusiast, and I'm sharing my knowledge to the best of my ability. And I'm probably going to be wrong in several places in this podcast. So please do your own research. And I would love for you to get back to me if you find some leak in my understanding.
Or just want some tips and guidance. I'm sure Emil would love to give tips and guidance for anyone who's inspired by this.
I would love. Just doing this episode inspired me to... I have written 4 episodes for my YouTube channel about topics related to fasting and longevity.
That's really cool. And how do you find your YouTube channel?
It's called What's Missing. You can find it by YouTubing What's Missing, I'm pretty sure. Or my name, Emil Ekvart.
Yeah, you'll find Emil's name in the description somewhere. It's hard to spell.
It's hard to spell.
Okay.
And if you subscribe and I get 100 subscribers, I could have answered this question by, well, you can go to YouTube/What's Missing.
Okay, we'll do that. I'll give you a subscribe for Christmas, I promise.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's move on. The next thing that I'm doing that my mother think is crazy, and to be honest, I believe it's a little bit weird as well, is that I put butter, coconut oil, and MCT oil in my coffee, and then I put it in a blender and I drink it because I get a lot of fat in myself. And all my life I've been told that fats are bad for you, and you tell me it's not, and I still don't understand why. Why am I doing this?
Okay, there are several reasons. First of all, coffee is proven to stimulate autophagy. So you get more autophagy by drinking coffee regarding the fasting.
Okay, so if we're fasting, it's good to drink coffee in the morning.
Yeah. And for several reasons, when I drink, this is the second time I do a 10-day fast. The first time I was in Indonesia and I had no coffee or supplements. And it was quite tough. This time I am drinking more than my normal dose of coffee and I'm taking some supplements. And it's so much easier. My energy hasn't been under 7 out of 10 in a week now. And the reason is because my body is tapping into its own fat reserves and is using fat for fuel. And that state is called ketosis.
Okay, I feel like we're opening a whole new loop of questions going in that direction right now.
Yes. So may I share why I started being interested in this?
Feel free.
Yes. So before I started working with Great, I worked as a professional poker player. And there I was pretty much competing in a mind sport for 12-hour sessions each day. And the conventional diet tips I had heard was to eat a lot of pasta and porridge and stuff in the morning. So I did that, and first I got quite tired for 30 minutes, and then I had a lot of energy for 2 hours, and then I started to become very hungry. And that was so inconvenient for me because I couldn't take a break to eat. So I started to researching different options, and I found this about ketosis, which is that you use fat for fuel. And when you do that, your energy will become much more stable, because when the food in your stomach is out, the body can use its own reserves as fuel in a way that is not possible if there are carbohydrates present in the system.
Okay. Yeah, we're opening a whole new loop of questions here, but let's head in that direction then, and we'll get back to coffee and fats.
Yes.
So ketosis, from my understanding listening, is a way of getting our body to use fat as a reserve of energy rather than the food we have in our stomach. Is that correct?
Yes. So if you're in ketosis, you get into ketosis by having low amounts of carbohydrates in your system, maybe less than 20 grams per day.
And carbohydrates is usually sugar as well, right? That's a carbohydrate.
Exactly. And when you are in ketosis, your body will use fat as fuel, either from fat you eat as food or by fat that is stored on your body.
Okay, so the way to sum that up, it's good to be in ketosis. You get to ketosis by not eating carbohydrates, which includes sugar, for a significant amount of time, and that will make your energy level more even, because you always have some fat on your body, but you're not always having food in your stomach.
Exactly. And ketosis is proven to help you lose weight, reduce hunger, give you cognition benefits, and increase longevity.
And when you say proven, in what ways is it proven?
There's a lot of research on it.
Okay, I feel I got a decent understanding of that. Let's head back to coffee. Why am I putting butter in my coffee? And how does that relate to ketosis then?
Okay, so coffee is increasing autophagy, but it's also increasing ketosis. It's increasing the rate at which your body is using this fat for fuel. And you're also putting an oil that is called...
Let me stop you there. Okay, so the coffee is enhancing the speed at which I access the energy from fat, for example, then.
Exactly.
Okay, so there are things in coffee that speeds up that process.
Yes.
Okay.
And the MCT oil you also put in the coffee is also increasing that process. And the reason that the advantage with this, the MCT oil, is
what
that
is MCT oil?
It stands for, it's a part of the coconut oil is called medium chain triglycerides. So it's an extract of coconut oil that is putting your body into ketosis easily, even if you might have some carbohydrates present in the system. So it's kind of simulating ketosis, not autophagy.
And MCT oil can be bought in most stores then, I assume. Is it a common thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Most
MCT.
stores, health stores.
Yeah, that was something I'd never heard before I started drinking this coffee, and I still don't really know what it is. Okay, so MCT speeds it up. And why do I want butter and coconut oil in it?
It's fuel for your body. Your body will use that fat as fuel, and it will reduce hunger and give you mental, stable energy.
Okay, but all of my life I've been told that fat is bad for you, or saturated fat is bad for you. Why isn't this fat bad for me?
Yes, I heard that too. So what do you think your mom is worried about when she is saying that fat is bad for you?
I have absolutely no idea. She's just worried.
Okay, so I might guess then that the main worry is heart disease, and maybe second to that, weight gain.
Possibly.
Yes. Those ideas is what I was brought up with too, so it has taken me some time to overcome that fear. So may I share a little story about fats and where those ideas came from?
Feel free.
Okay, so back in before 1910, people were almost exclusively, to my understanding, cooking in saturated fats. But 1910, it started to become more efficient to produce vegetable oils.
What is saturated fats?
Saturated fat is the
You
kind
give
of
some
fat.
examples of what's saturated fat in.
It's in butter, coconut oil. So people got butter, and it's in animal fat too.
Okay.
So people got fat from cows or pigs, or they got the butter from cows.
Okay.
And they used that to cook in.
What other fats are there?
What other fats? There are polysaturated fats, monosaturated fats. There are a couple of different ones.
Okay, so a lot of complicated words and combined with
that's
fats.
why I didn't want to say it. So saturated fat is animal fat, butter, coconut oil.
Okay.
Might be something I missed. Eggs, egg yolks. There's a lot of saturated fats.
Okay, they were cooking in saturated fats. Let's get back there.
Yes, and in 1910, somewhere around there, it started to become much more efficient to produce vegetable oils. And people were switching from saturated fat to vegetable oils. And before this, heart disease wasn't that big of a problem. I'm talking about the US now. About 8% of the people that died from heart disease. And after 1910, around somewhere there, the amount of people that were killed by heart disease started to go up a lot. And it started to peak around 1960. And at the same time, a president, Eisenhower, died in a heart attack. I think that was 1955. And the population wanted to find what is responsible for this? What is the culprit? What is causing these heart attacks? And of course, I'm not saying it's only vegetable oils. More things happen. For example, people died less from infections and stuff like that. So people lived longer. So there was more time to die from a heart attack. So that's also a factor, of course. But it became much more of a problem in the 50s, 60s. Are you with me so far?
Yeah. Let's see. So to sum that up, before 1910, people were cooking with saturated fats from like butter and stuff. And then it became much easier, much cheaper, I'm guessing, to get other kinds of fat to cook in. For example, I don't know, rapeseed oil and stuff like that, probably corn oil or something. And people started cooking in that instead. And then you could see heart disease went up, and we didn't back then know the connection between them.
Exactly. No one knew the connection. And in the 60s, one scientist called Ansel Keys had a hypothesis. And I'm saying this is a hypothesis because it has not been proven yet. And that is that saturated fat clogs the arteries and leads to heart attacks. And he's convinced a lot of governmental bodies and other scientists about this. So in the 60s, the American government went out with a nationwide campaign that said that saturated fat and cholesterol will lead to heart attack. So you should reduce your intake of saturated fat, eggs, and fat from animals.
Okay. So we have been brought up with the idea of fat being the enemy. That's why my mother has told me that butter is bad for me, but in reality, that was never proven.
It has never been proven. Quite to the contrary, in the last 10 years, there has been 4 studies that I have seen that are huge studies from places like Oxford and Cambridge, one with 500,000 people in it, that shows no link between saturated fat and heart disease. And what happens when you stop eating saturated fats and animal fats?
I don't know. Educate me. I get less energy.
Yes. No. Well, if you don't replace it with something else. Yeah. And people replaced it a lot with vegetable oils, sugar, refined carbohydrates, junk food. And since then, the number of people that have been hospitalized because of heart-related reasons have increased. The amount of obesity has gone from 12% when that was introduced to 32%, I think 2015. And today heart disease is the biggest killer in America. 1 out of 4 American dies in heart disease.
Okay, so we started with why am I putting fats in my coffee, and we end up with a lot of people dying from heart disease. And let's see if I can connect the dots getting there. Basically, we used to think, and a lot of us still think, including some ways me and definitely my mother, that the reason for heart disease were all kinds of fat then, not just one kind or the other kind. And we started to eat less of the good kinds of fat, and we replaced it with carbohydrates, vegetable oils, and a lot of things that were less good for us.
And cheaper to produce. And what we actually missed out on then is that these fats are really, really good for us. And now I'm putting butter and coconut oil into my coffee because I want to get more of that in my body. Yes.
And that gives me good energy.
2/3 of your brain is made out of fat. Fat is very crucial for a lot of cognitive function. And yeah.
Okay.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm sitting and trying to wrap my head around things. And if I should sum this up in a sentence, is I've learned that fat is bad for me, and it could be bad for me, but a lot of fat is actually very good for me. And now I want to get more fat into my diet, but I want it to be the good kinds of fat as butter and coconut oil, not bad kinds of fat as, I don't know, fried food or chocolate.
Yes, chocolate is actually saturated fat, so it's the same fat. Chocolate fat is very good for you. It's just the sugar in the chocolate is bad for you.
Okay, so very dark chocolate is good for me, but regular chocolate that I buy in the store, a Mars bar is 90% sugar probably.
Yes, and trans fats, which is the worst kind. Now, I want to give you a way to think about this that will make it easier. So instead of asking yourself, is this fat bad for me? Ask the question, how much have someone messed with this food before I eat it? For example, if you have a sugar beet that is in the earth and you eat that, that's probably not going to be bad for you. But if you have someone take a lot of sugar beets, mix them with a lot of chemicals and produce them in 6 different tanks and press out a syrup, that is probably not going to be as good for you. Same thing with butter that comes from a cow. If you have a cow that is out doing cow stuff, eating grass, is happy with his cow buddies, the fat that cow is producing is probably not going to be bad for you. But if you take the same cow and put him in cow prison, feed him genetically manipulated soy that is totally unnatural for a cow to eat, prevent him from move, and feed him antibiotics so he can even survive, the butter that comes from that cow is probably not going to be good for you. So ask yourself, how much have someone messed with this product?
Okay, so it's not as easy to say butter is good for you. Butter could actually be bad for you if you're buying the wrong kinds of butter.
Yes, for sure. So
how do you know if the butter is good or not?
Look for grass-fed butter.
Grass-fed butter, and that means the cow has been eating grass and not soy, for example.
Yes, so if a cow eats soy, it cannot make the same kind of butter. So there's different fats in the butter, and the butter becomes more inflammatory.
Yeah.
And just to use some common sense here, we have eaten fats for millennia. The heart disease epidemic was starting in the beginning of the 1900s. So why would a food that we ate before that be responsible? Instead, I would look at what was introduced after we started to get this problem. And that is vegetable oils, sugar, and processed carbohydrates.
I mean, I think it's a simplified way of looking at it. Sure, we didn't eat the same way, and at the same time, we didn't drive cars, so we were actually going places all the time. We were fasting, as you said before, on a regular basis. We weren't smoking, we weren't stressing in the same way, we were never inside. So it could be the food that we're eating, that makes sense. But it could also be a lot of other things, which makes it tricky to simplify it like that.
100%. But to make something that was existing before that responsible for it makes less sense.
Yeah, that's true.
Makes less sense to me.
Yeah, I can see that. It's less likely that it was the meat we were eating if it's the same kind of meat compared to something completely different.
Yeah, unless we've done something weird with the meat, which we have.
Which we have. Okay. This episode is running a lot longer than we planned for, so I'll suggest we wrap this up and we'll do an episode version 2 of this and continue with the rest of the things we had planned to say. What do you think about that?
That sounds good. So how about, because I'm in flow right now, so how about we keep recording and then we just cut this in 2 and then we will have 2 episodes. I can do a reintroduction.
Okay, let's do that. So I'll summarize this one then and wrap this up, and we'll go from there. So we'll just start a new recording and we'll go into it.
Yes.
Okay, so let's cut from kind of there.
So how about you do an outro for this episode?
Yeah, I'm gonna start by summarizing what we said about fats, because I feel that was a lot. Okay, so I keep coming back to the question of why am I putting butter, coconut oil, and MCT oil in my coffee? And this is something that I do every day. And what I take with me from this conversation is one reason why I'm doing it is, one reason why I'm drinking coffee is that it's good for how my body accesses energy from fat, for example. It brings me closer to these complicated words, ketosis and autophagy, which is 2 things that are good for me, for cleaning up my body and giving me energy. And I'm putting butter, coconut oil, and MCT oil in because they're all healthy fats, which to my understanding then is a lot of energy, but also needed for, the brain was apparently a lot of fats. It's needed for the brain, it's needed for a lot of different functions in our body. And we've learned that fat is bad for you, even though that's not necessarily true. Or at least some fats are very good for us. And I also take with me that the less someone has touched the food, the better it is. And by touched, I mean going through different machines and processes and pesticides and whatever it is. So if there is butter from a happy cow walking around in the green countrylands of Sweden, great. Butter from a cow standing still, chained up in a kind of factory environment, being fed weird stuff and filled with antibiotics, bad butter. And to know the difference, it's good to look for grass-fed butter on the box. And yeah, I got a better understanding of why I'm drinking coffee that a lot of people think is weird.
Yes, and one thing I would like to add to that is that good fats, from my perspective, comes from, well, the fat I choose to get the most out of is butter, coconut oil, like you said. The cacao butter in chocolate is very good for you. MCT oil, like we mentioned.
And to clarify,
avocado.
Chocolate in this case is very strong, very high. What's in chocolate? Cacao. 90% or more, not chocolate as in Mars bars.
Exactly. And avocados are great for you. Olive oil, great for you. Egg yolks, great for you. Animal fat, again, from happy animals, from my perspective.
I like that. From happy animals are good for you. That's probably an easy way to think of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just end this then and say that we are doing this podcast because we believe that entrepreneurship is the way to make the world a better place. And one way is then talking about health and how to get more energy and do more things. And I'm thinking a lot about this in my personal life. And I'm very happy for these life hacks, even though I haven't fully understood them before. And to get this podcast out there, we really need your support, you listening to this. And we would love if you click subscribe in whatever podcast app you're using. Because what happens when you click subscribe is partly that you get our episodes regularly, but it also increases our chances by a lot to get ranked up in different top lists about the most listened podcasts. That they're actually built in a way that these podcast top lists are not necessarily based on who listens to the podcast the most, but actually what are the percentage of people choosing to subscribe, because that's then a big signal of people really liking it. So please help us to get into those lists by clicking subscribe on this podcast. And please come back next week for the next health episode, because we will continue this series with another episode. Thank you, Ian.
I had a lot of fun. I so much enjoy speaking about this, and I really care about this topic.
It's clear. So thank you for today, Emil.
See you next week.
See you next week.